Hey there, and welcome to Family Revenge. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you can stay with us for every twist and turn. Let's jump right in. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the ballroom was how out of place I felt. The place looked like something out of a movie. Chandeliers dripping with crystal, white tablecloths, and guests in dresses and suits that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. I had spent nearly an hour that afternoon debating what to wear, finally settling on a simple navy dress and a pair of old heels. Now, standing in the middle of the crowd, I felt like I had made the wrong choice. My name is Dr. Sarah Foster. I'm 37 years old and I live in Boston. I'm a scientist, a chemist to be exact. But if you asked anyone in this room, you'd think I was just some kid still figuring things out. Tonight was supposed to be about my parents, their 40th wedding anniversary, but I already knew that before the night was over, I'd be reminded how little they understood me or my life. My parents, Richard and Elaine Foster, were the stars of the evening. Dad looked sharp in his black tux, soaking up compliments like sunlight, while Mom glided through the crowd in a pale gold gown, smiling as if she had planned this whole event just to remind everyone how successful our family was. Every few minutes, someone would stop me, asking about my brother Marcus, the successful lawyer, the proud father of two perfect kids. I'd smile, nod, and answer politely, waiting for them to ask about me. When they did, it was always the same question. So, are you still doing that science thing? I caught sight of my parents near the head table. Dad was laughing with a group of guests, holding a glass of champagne, while Mom waved me over. Sarah, come say hi to the Andersons, she said, her voice bright. They were just asking about you. I stepped closer, already bracing myself. Still working in the lab? Mr. Anderson asked with a polite smile. Your mom tells me you're making some sort of soap, or was it shampoo? I forced a laugh. Not exactly. I'm working on enzyme catalysts. They're used in sustainable energy and… Oh, isn't that cute? Mom cut in with a laugh, patting my arm like I was a child showing off a drawing. Sarah's always been such a curious little thing, tinkering away with her experiments. Something tightened in my chest. It wasn't just the words, it was the way they looked at me, like my work was a hobby, like I wasn't standing on the edge of something important. I smiled, but I could feel my face burning. I wanted to tell them about the years of research, the late nights, the breakthroughs. But I stayed quiet, clutching my glass, already counting the minutes until I could leave. Dinner had barely finished when my father stood up, tapping his glass with a silver spoon. The chatter in the ballroom died down as everyone turned their attention toward him. He thrived in moments like this, standing tall in his tuxedo, his voice strong and confident as he began thanking everyone for coming. 40 years, he said, smiling warmly at my mother, who sat beside him looking radiant. It hasn't always been easy, but Elaine and I built something we're proud of, a family, a legacy. The crowd applauded, and I found myself clapping too, though my mind drifted to how many late nights I'd spent in the lab, quietly building a different kind of legacy, one my parents never seemed to see. Dad's speech shifted, as I knew it would, to Marcus. And of course, we couldn't be prouder of our son, Marcus Foster, he said, motioning toward my brother at the next table. A brilliant attorney, a devoted husband, and a father of two incredible children. He's really made something of himself. The room filled with approving murmurs and clapping. Marcus grinned, giving a modest shrug as if to say, "Oh, stop." I forced a smile, even as something sharp twisted in my chest. And then there's Sarah, Dad continued, turning toward me with a chuckle that made my stomach sink. Our Sarah's still finding her way. She's been experimenting with science, playing around with things in the lab. He laughed lightly. We're just glad she's doing what she loves. My mother added, Sarah's always been our curious one, always taking things apart, tinkering. It's nice that she's kept it as a hobby. A few guests chuckled politely, the kind of laughter people give when they don't know what else to do. My ears burned. I stared down at the linen napkin in my lap, my thoughts screaming while my lips stayed silent. A hobby? I wanted to stand up and tell them how I had spent years working on breakthroughs that companies were already using to cut waste and energy costs. I wanted to tell them I wasn't finding my way. I had found it, and I was making real, measurable change. But in that moment, all I felt was small. To them, I wasn't a scientist. I was still just the quiet daughter who never quite lived up to their polished expectations. I clapped when everyone else clapped, my face carefully blank. Inside, though, I was crumbling. The ballroom slowly shifted into the cocktail hour after dinner. Waiters glided between guests, refilling champagne glasses and setting down trays of tiny hors d'oeuvres. I stood near the edge of the room, pretending to admire the floral arrangements, while I tried to catch my breath from the speech. My father's words, finding her way, still echoed in my head, making me feel like I was 17 again, sitting at the kitchen table while Marcus bragged about his internship and my parents nodded in approval. "Sarah, dear," a familiar voice called. I turned to see Mrs. Williamson, an old friend of my parents, tottering toward me in a sequined dress that caught every light in the room. She grabbed my hands with the kind of enthusiasm that felt just a little too forced. "Your parents were telling us all about you. You're the scientist, right? Do you work in medicine? That must be so rewarding." I forced a smile. "Not exactly. My work is more in the area of enzyme catalysis, which has applications in renewable energy and—" "Oh," she interrupted, her head tilting as if she had lost interest after the second word. "So not medicine. That's too bad. Doctors save lives, you know? Well, I'm sure your work is very interesting." The way she said interesting made it sound like a polite synonym for pointless. Before I could respond, another guest chimed in, a man with slicked back hair and a Rolex that seemed to be the centerpiece of his outfit. "Does your research pay well?" he asked, chuckling as if it were a harmless joke. "All that schooling must have been expensive. My son just went into finance. Now that's a career with some real payoff." I bit my lips so hard I tasted blood. "I'm not in this field for the paycheck," I said softly, though I doubted anyone was really listening. As more guests rotated in and out of the conversation, each question felt like a reminder of how little this crowd valued anything that didn't come with a big salary or a prestigious title. It didn't matter that my work could change entire industries. To them, it wasn't impressive because it wasn't immediately visible or profitable. I excused myself as soon as I could, slipping out toward the hallway near the restrooms. I pulled out my phone just to have something to hold on to, already planning my escape. The only thing I wanted was to go home, shut the world out, and bury myself in the one place I felt understood. My lab. I slipped away from the crowd again, this time finding a quiet corner near the side entrance where a soft draft rolled in each time the door opened. My phone buzzed in my hand, mostly pointless notifications I had been checking to avoid small talk, when I noticed an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. The country code wasn't one I recognized. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but something in me, maybe curiosity or boredom, made me swipe to answer. "Hello," I said, keeping my voice low. "Dr. Sarah Foster." The voice on the other end carried a calm, authoritative tone with a faint accent. "This is Professor Eric Lindfist, calling from the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences." I froze. "I'm sorry. From where?" "The Royal Swedish Academy," he repeated patiently. "Dr. Foster, I have the great honor of informing you that you have been awarded this year's Nobel Prize in Chemistry." For a moment, I didn't breathe. I looked around, half expecting someone to jump out and tell me it was a prank. What? I think there must be a mistake." "There is no mistake, Dr. Foster," Professor Lindfist said warmly. "Your work on enzyme-based catalysis has significantly advanced the field of sustainable energy. The Nobel Committee was unanimous in its decision. Your contributions are groundbreaking, and we are delighted to recognize you." I leaned against the wall, gripping the phone so tightly my hand hurt. "Are you serious? This is real?" "I assure you it is very real," he said, with a hint of amusement in his voice. "We will send official confirmation and details shortly, but I wanted you to hear it from me first." The words sank in like a slow-moving tide. Years of relentless research, sleepless nights, and quiet sacrifices. All of it had led here. A Nobel Prize. I wanted to shout, to cry, to call someone who would understand. But all I heard around me were the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses from the party. A room full of people who had just spent the evening belittling the very work that had earned me this recognition. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice shaky. I don't know what to say." "Enjoy this moment," Professor Lindfist replied kindly. "You have earned it." When the call ended, I just stood there, staring at my phone. The world had shifted, but the party carried on as if nothing had changed. I don't know how long I stood there, phone still in my hand, staring at nothing. The noise of the party carried on, but I felt like I was in another world, one where everything I'd worked for had just been validated in the most extraordinary way. My parents' voices from earlier, calling my work a hobby, echoed bitterly in my mind. For once, I didn't want to stay quiet. I walked back into the main room, my steps steady, but my heart pounding. My father was holding court again, telling some story about Marcus's recent court victory, while my mother laughed along. I cleared my throat, but no one noticed. I tried again, louder this time. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, raising my voice just enough to be heard over the music and chatter. A few heads turned. "I have something to share." The room grew quieter, though I could still feel the hum of conversation. My parents looked at me, confused, like I had just interrupted something important. I swallowed hard. "I just received a phone call," I continued. "I've been awarded the Nobel Prize in Chemistry." For a moment, there was silence, a stunned, heavy silence. Then a few glasses clinked nervously, as if people weren't sure they'd heard me correctly. "The Nobel Prize?" someone repeated near the back of the room. "Yes," I said, my voice trembling now, but not from doubt. "The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences just called me. My work on enzyme-based catalysis was selected for this year's prize." My mother's face was frozen in shock, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't form the words. My father blinked at me, as if trying to decide whether I was joking. But then from the corner of the room, I heard a voice I recognized, Dr. Peterson, an old professor from my graduate years who I hadn't seen in ages. He stepped forward, his face alight with recognition. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Peterson said, raising his glass, "if you don't understand what this means, let me explain. Sarah's work has changed how we approach sustainable energy. Winning a Nobel Prize is one of the greatest achievements in the world of science. This is historic." A ripple of astonishment went through the crowd. Guests who had politely ignored me earlier were now staring at me with wide eyes. My father looked pale, the memory of his earlier speech, the one where I was still finding my way, hanging awkwardly in the air. I just stood there, letting the moment settle. For the first time all evening, I felt like I truly existed in that room. For a long, tense moment after my announcement, no one said anything. Then the room erupted with a mix of whispers, exclamations, and applause. People who had barely looked at me all evening suddenly wanted to shake my hand. I smiled faintly, still trying to process the reality of it myself. But when I turned toward my parents, their expressions told me everything. My mother looked as if someone had just spoken in a language she didn't understand. My father's jaw was tight, his usual confidence gone. "Sarah," my mother finally said, her voice soft and uncertain. "Did you say Nobel Prize? As in the one they give to famous people?" I felt my lips curl into a wry smile. "Yes, Mom, that one." Guests crowded closer. Professor Martinez, a chemist I had met at a conference years ago, stepped forward and clasped my shoulder. "Sarah, I read your latest paper on enzyme catalysis. Truly groundbreaking work. Your research is already changing how industries approach energy efficiency." Dr. Kim, another colleague, nodded enthusiastically. "Your work has saved companies millions of dollars in energy costs while reducing emissions. It's extraordinary, Sarah. Congratulations." Their words felt like a warm tide washing over me, but my parents seemed even more bewildered. My mother glanced at my father as if waiting for him to speak, but he remained silent, his hand resting on the back of a chair. Marcus appeared at my side, his brow furrowed. "Why didn't you ever tell us how big your work was?" he asked, lowering his voice. "You made it sound like you were just doing experiments for fun." I sighed. "Because whenever I tried to talk about it, no one listened. Dad would change the subject. Mom would tell me not to overcomplicate things. After a while, I just stopped trying." That landed harder than I expected. Marcus's eyes shifted to our father, who was now rubbing his chin, looking uncomfortable. The guests kept talking around us, their curiosity piqued, asking about my research and my future plans. My parents, who had once dismissed my work as some quirky pastime, were now confronted with the undeniable reality of what I had accomplished. Finally, my father cleared his throat. "Sarah," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I owe you an apology. I didn't realize how wrong I was about you." He paused, shaking his head. "You're not just finding your way. You found it, and it's extraordinary." For the first time that night, I let myself breathe. The energy in the room shifted after my father's apology. For the first time all evening, my parents looked at me not as their awkward daughter, but as someone they were only just beginning to see clearly. My mother still seemed a little dazed, sitting stiffly with her hands clasped, as if she didn't know what to say. But eventually, she spoke. "Sarah," she began hesitantly, Can you explain what it is you actually do? I think we've never really understood. There was no malice in her tone this time, just genuine curiosity. I pulled out a chair and sat down beside them. It's hard to sum up quickly, I said with a small smile, but my work focuses on enzyme based catalysts. They're proteins that speed up chemical reactions, and I've spent years developing new ones that can reduce waste and energy use in manufacturing. My father furrowed his brow. So, this helps companies save money. Yes, I said, but more importantly, it helps the environment. My research could change how industries handle things like plastics and renewable fuels. It could cut down on pollution and make energy production more sustainable. There was a pause. My mother's eyes softened, as though she was trying to piece together a version of me she'd never taken the time to know. I didn't realize you're doing something that big. I tried to tell you years ago, I said, my voice quiet. But I think you thought it was just talk, so I stopped trying. Marcus joined us, looking sheepish. Sarah, I'm sorry if I was part of that too. I never meant to downplay your work. I just didn't get it. Before I could answer, Professor Martinez stepped over again, beaming. Your daughter's research is already being used by several biotech companies, he told my parents. It's no exaggeration to say she's leading a revolution in chemistry. Her discoveries are going to shape how industries operate for decades. My parents glanced at each other, the weight of his words sinking in. Dr. Kim added, Do you realize how few scientists ever reach this level? Sarah's work is referenced in labs across the globe. Hearing those words, something shifted between us. My father reached for my hand. We've been so proud of Marcus for his work and his family, but I guess we didn't know how to be proud of you, Sarah. We didn't understand your world. I took a slow breath, feeling something I hadn't expected. Relief. It's okay, I said. I just wanted you to see me for who I am, not who you thought I should be. As the evening wound down, we talked more than we had in years. I explained my research in simpler terms, and they listened, really listened, asking questions about its potential for medicine, energy, even food production. For the first time, they looked at me not with confusion or doubt, but with genuine respect. When the party finally began to clear out, I felt lighter, like something that had weighed on me for years had finally been set down. As the last of the guests began to leave, the room settled into a quiet hum. Waiters cleared tables while soft music played in the background. I stood near the entrance, watching my parents thank everyone for coming. For the first time that night, I felt no urge to slip away. Something in the air had shifted, and I wasn't invisible anymore. My father approached me, his tuxedo jacket unbuttoned, his expression unusually serious. Sarah, he said, motioning for me to walk with him. We stepped onto the balcony, where the night air was cool and still. The city lights stretched out in the distance, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he cleared his throat. Are you happy? He asked, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. With your life, I mean, with the work you do. The question caught me off guard. I turned to look at him. Yes, Dad, I am. My work? It gives me purpose. It's not always easy, but knowing I'm contributing to something bigger than myself, that makes it worth it. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the ground. I don't think I ever understood that. I was so busy comparing you to what I thought success looked like. A steady job, a family, a certain image. I didn't see what you were building on your own. His words carried a weight I didn't expect. For years, I had longed for this. Not praise, but recognition. It's okay, I said softly. I know we come from different worlds. He shook his head. No, it's not okay. I owe you an apology. I've been proud of you, but I never said it. And tonight, hearing you talk about your work, I realized I should have told you a long time ago. For a moment, I saw the man behind the polished exterior, vulnerable and human. I felt the years of misunderstanding between us start to dissolve. Thank you, I whispered. That means more than you know. He gave me a small smile. You've accomplished something remarkable, Sarah, not just with this Nobel Prize, but with the way you've stayed true to yourself. I'm proud to call you my daughter. The lump in my throat made it hard to speak, but I managed to say, I'm proud to be your daughter, too. As we walked back inside, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything. My parents finally saw me, truly saw me, and that was enough. When I left the venue later that night, I carried that feeling with me like a quiet, steady warmth.